What a joyful news, Miss Matty. Me feel like my heart going bust. Jamaica people colonize England in reverse. That is an excerpt of Louise Bennett's poem, Colonization. And I am Professor Opal Palmer Adisa, and I'm delighted with the University of the West Indies Press to be announcing 100 plus voices for Miss Lou, an anthology of poems, tributes, and essay dedicated to Louise Bennett. And this anthology began from an idea I had when in 2019 we celebrated the 100 year of Miss Lou. We felt it was very fitting to do that, and so the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, in collaboration with the Minister of Gender, Culture, Entertainment, and Sport, and various other departments at the university, the language department, the English and literature, language and English, I always mix that up, and other departments came together and hosted this amazing 100-day celebration for Miss Lou. And I thought it would be an appropriate fit-in to have an anthology with her. And the anthology is amazing, 100 voices plus for Miss Lou, and the cover design is available. And I just want to share with you a sampling of the amazing array of people that are in this collection. So the book opens with an introduction by me, and I should give you a preface. In 1987, I interviewed Miss Lou. I was at the University of California, Berkeley, working on my dissertation, and I came to interview Miss Lou because it was my intention then to do a biography of her. And then it got to be so awesome and unwildly that I thought, no, I couldn't do that. But it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to do work on Miss Lou. So when the idea of celebrating the centennial of her birth came up, I said, well, let's do a collection of 100 people contributing to this anthology. And many people thought, oh, it's impossible to get 100 good collection, good array of people, but I did, in fact, more. Anyway, so the introduction, I talk about the interview I did in 1987 and 1988. I came back twice to interview her. And contextualize what Miss Lou means for me, not just as a feminist and a gender specialist, but mostly as a writer, mainly as a writer, and how I came to know Miss Lou. My mother loved her and we listened to her poems, and also how we saw her on stage at the pantomime at Ward Theatre with Randy Williams. So in the first part of the anthology, which is divided into 4 sections, there's my introduction. There's a foreword, Simply Love, by Lorna Goodison, the former poet laureate of Jamaica. Then there is another piece, an outstanding cultural influencer by the Honorable Olive Grange, Minister of Gender, Culture, Entertainment and Sport. And then a formidable woman by the Honorable Percival J. Patterson, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, whom I had the pleasure of interviewing for this book. So you already see that this is a must get, if it was just for the 4 pieces that are part of the preface. But also, it is important that we keep who Miss Lou is and what she stood for important. And you know, we know Miss Lou for her Jamaican nation language poems, or some of us still say erroneously patois. But Miss Lou was also about love. And there's a poem for her in one of her collections that I love, selected poems that Mervyn Morris edited, and who has done tremendous work on Miss Lou. And this is one of the poems that I think really epitomize who Miss Lou is, because as I was doing this anthology and going around and speaking to people and interviewing persons for it, one of the consistent things that came across is that Miss Lou represented and symbolized love. And so her love letter, which is a delightful poem that I don't think enough people hear and know about, does epitomize the quintessential Miss Lou and the essence of who she is, and her very keen attention to Jamaican culture and our language. So, love letter. Me darling love, me little dove, me dumpling, me gizzada, me sweetie Sue. I goes for you like how flies goes for sugar. And this first stanza of this poem is so much indicative of Miss Lou, so much indicative of our culture, the gizada, the sugar. I mean, who would be writing a love letter to someone they are interested in and say, I goes for you like old flies goes for sugar? It is so culturally specific. And so this 100 Voices for Miss Lou, which is being published by the University of the West Indies Press, another section or section one, which is called Big Family. And of course, we couldn't have a book on Miss Lou without having very important people who are close to her. So in this section, we have her son, Fabian Coverley, who's talking about my mother, my friend, which Miss Lou was for him. And of course, the wonderful Joan Andrea Hutchison, Jamaican poet. Thank you, Miss Lou Tenke. And Joan Andrea has done tremendous work on Louise Bennett, interviewed her when she had moved to Canada, and has some really important footage. Then Mervyn Morris, the Professor Emerita from the University of the West Indies, who have done the most extensive work, I think, on Miss Lou in terms of critiquing, not just compiling this collection, but also critiquing her work and situating her as a poet, as a cultural icon, and her significance to Jamaica. So he has a lovely piece in there, Together for Life, Louise and Eric Coverley. And because he knew them for so long, and I have to thank Mervyn, because when I came home and said I wanted to interview my Miss Lou for my dissertation, it was Mervyn who provided the introduction. And then there's another piece, A Strict but Wonderful Mother by Christine Swaby, who was Miss Lou's adopted daughter. And if you don't know, Miss Lou throughout her life adopted not just people, but children whom she cared for and educated. And Christine was one such person. And then Clive Walker has a very important and interesting piece about The Truth Must Reveal Itself. And then I had the pleasure, Easton Lee recently died, of interviewing Easton Lee, one of the great joys of my life. And he talks about Louise Bennett and the long relationship they have, and how he trained with her, and how she showed him and made him so insightful about many aspects of Jamaican culture. Then, of course, we have the amazing Madre Wiley, drummer, musical extraordinaire, who worked with the National Dance Theatre Company and Miss Lou for many, many years, and have taught and still teaches. She has conversation, consultation, communication, and celebration. And this is a really wonderful piece that Marjorie has done about Miss Lou, kind of looking at the trajectory of their relationship, but focusing on some very important moment. And of course, Barbara Goulden, because they worked on the pantomime together, A Journey of Love. So that's just a sampling of section one. And there's more by Neil Armstrong, Lincoln Robinson, Pauline Stone Meyer, who worked with her with pantomime, Bonga Herman, who played with her, Oliver Samuels, Franklin Campbell of Fab Five, Paul Keane Douglas from Trinidad, Faye Ellington, Eric Douglas, Faith de Aguilar, who has been, I don't know if imitating is the right word, but there, Muta Baruka, who put her in the studio, Lolita Nib Phillips, Pamela Appellet, it goes on. And that is just section one, my people. And so now I want to just then read one of my favorite poems by Miss Lou, which is Jamaican Woman. And I love this poem because when I interviewed Miss Lou, I had talked to her about, her feminist strain. And of course, Miss Lou didn't call herself a feminist, but what she said was that women, of course, were important to her. And so, and she understood their plight. And she also understood, as this poem so clearly exemplifies, that at that time, prior to the coming of, feminism, that Jamaican women were always feminists, but they had to be subterfuge with it. And this poem, Jamaican Woman, not woman, woman, in a sense, explains that. And I will read two stanzas. Jamaican woman kunusa is how them general. Look how long them liberated and the man them never know. Look how long Jamaican woman, mother, sweetheart, wife, and all, outer road and inner yard, depend a dominate her part. And so the poem is a wonderful narrative poem that takes us through the various Jamaican women, Granny Nanny to the spelling bee champion, and talks about how the women have always been there and will continue to be there. But the really great line, if I can find it, I don't remember which stanza it's in, but oh yes, in this stanza, she says, Jamaican woman know she strong. She know she talawa, but she no want her picnic them fi call her papa. So throughout the book, people are celebrating, throughout this anthology, people are celebrating Miss Lou. And the celebration of her is in her work. The celebration of her is in the strength of her work. The celebration of her is that she knew and loved and appreciated Jamaican culture. The celebration of her is that Miss Lou is known internationally and has championed not just Jamaican culture, but Jamaican language, which many of us call patois. But I like the term that Kamau Brathwaite used, nation language. She has championed our nation language, has made sure that we understand its validity, its fluidity, its mixture of Twi from Ghana, because many of us have that Ghanaian African ancestry, and English, and its creativity, its dexterity. And so this is also why the collection is separated into all of these different sections. So I've told you now about section 1, and now we go to section 2. And it's about reaffirming our culture. And each of the sections, which I neglect to tell you, starts with one of Miss Lou's poem. And so the poem that introduces this section, because of the variety of voices that we have, is No Little Twang. And if you know that poem, it talks about this young man who goes and comes back and have no little twang. And in this section, we have some really, again, massive voices, major Jamaican cultural leaders, poets, writers. We have a piece the section starts with a piece by Amina Blackwood Meeks, formidable storyteller. Then we have a wonderful poem by none other than Juliet Holness. And then we have a piece by Patrick Reed Warren, Michael Holgate, of course, Jean Small, Fabian Thomas, Velma Pollard, Melissa McKenzie, Kevin Arnsby, and Lisa Tomlinson has a ring ding love affair where there's an interview that happens and they talk about the importance of ring ding. And it's unfortunate, which is also why this anthology by the UE Press is so important, that so much of what Miss Lou did, unfortunately, was not preserved. And her ring ding, that important TV series that many Jamaicans over 40 are familiar with, and which gave them a foundation of Jamaican culture and pride, many of those recordings are no longer with us. And so it's very good to have Kevin Ornsby talking about the ring ding love affair. And so we go on in this section. We have pieces by Beverly Elaine Wright, Norman Darby, Beverly Lashley of the National Library, Curtis Meyer, Grace Lyons of the Heritage Singers in Canada, Janaea Shields, Kai Miller, Jamaica's formidable poet and writer, Margaret Bernal, Davia Ellis, Vivian Crawford, Farika Berhan, Tommy Ricketts, who has done, and he's the artist whose cover design I hope people would like, for the 100th day celebration of Miss Lou that we hosted at the regional headquarters. We had an exhibition of Tommy Ricketts' large portrayal of Miss Lou in a very different way, because we wanted to break out of the box of Miss Lou in the bandana and happy, which she was, everybody says that, but we wanted to show a much more complex and much more multi-layered aspect of Miss Lou, which sometimes gets forgotten. So for me, it was really important as the editor of this anthology to include Tommy Ricketts' pieces on Miss Lou to give us a different interpretation of Miss Lou, to see how a lot of what Miss Lou was doing is part of the larger history of Africa and those iconic symbols from Africa and other places. And that the cover, which you will see to me, and which I am partial to, I'm partial, of course, is very much, Miss Lou as a warrior with the pen. And so the pen nib was her weapon and she used it. And Miss Lou, when I spoke to her and other people who knew and worked with her, Miss Lou was very, I want to say, calculating. She knew what she was up against and she was ready for the fight because she believed in Jamaican culture. She understood that we would become, as we have become, a world iconic symbol. Everywhere in the world you go, Jamaica is known for our music, for our athletes, for our culture. And Miss Lou understood this at a very early stage and therefore used her pen, used the medium of performance to articulate and insist on this aspect of our culture. So you must, absolutely must, and I'm biased, but my bias is based on evidence. You absolutely must reserve your copy of 100 Plus Voices for Miss Lou, an anthology of tributes, poems, and essays. And we're getting now to section 3, which is Auntie Roche Say. And you know that Miss Lou had created Auntie Roche as a kind of alter ego to say the things that she herself wasn't always able to say, or to say them without sanction. And so Auntie Roche was like, she didn't mince her words and she called everybody out, both good and bad. And that was one of the formidable things about how, again, Miss Lou in many ways was subterfuge and very astute about her agenda and how she had to ensure that her agenda was articulated. So this is one of my copies of Auntie Roche Say. And I just want to start off by reading a little excerpt of good news headline. And in this COVID time, it is important that we have good news. And so good news headline, in a sense, is Miss Lou prophecy of some of the things that we need to encourage. You not notice how most of the time you always hear people complain about the bad manners and discourtesy with them a buck up on all over Jamaica. But you hardly ever hear anybody sing about the praise of the mannerable and good temper workers them buck up. No, sir. And Auntie Roche say that some people deserve praises. Yes, ma'am. Plenty people in praise. Plenty people is praise deserving for true. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely true that this anthology is praising Miss Lou, is thanking Miss Lou for being the mother of dub poetry, which Muta Baruka, who is also in this anthology, will testify to, praising Miss Lou for a lot of the influence that she has on contemporary culture that some of the contemporary artists aren't even aware of. But Miss Lou really set the stage for these things. And so section 4 starts with Dirty Tough, one of her poems that is international and that outlives time. Because, although it was written before the 70s, it is still relevant then as it is now in 2021. So we have this wonderful piece by Sherry Natural, Malachi Smith, Andre Bonner, Shirley Macy, Donna Hope, Pamela Mordecai, Ruth Howard, Kwame Dawes, Delroy McGregor, Kemar Cummins, on and on and on. Jean Laurie Chin, Sean Harrison, Anika Rowe, and Margaret Lim. And, as I said, it goes on and on. And then the last section, because I feel that I've been going on much longer than I should. And then there's also pieces by Jean Bentabreeze and Nadia Holm. Then section 4, engaging in a quarrel with history. This, for me, is, as an academic and a creative person, is an important piece to see the intersection between critique and literature. And so we start off with this wonderful piece by Carolyn Cooper, Professor Carolyn Cooper, Pedestrians Crosses Sites of Dislocation in Post-Colonial Jamaica. You have a piece by Dr. Delia Bean, Shifting Bodies and Missing Commodities. A piece by Donna Weir Soley, The Kunu Jamaican Woman and the Value of a Positive Counter-Narrative. And that's such an important piece. Dr. Isis Samaj Hall and L.A. Wanless has a conversation about a quarrel, language quarrel in Jamaica and why it is still happening. Hubert Devonish, who was really very supportive of me and this entire project, has a wonderful piece, Stitching Time Together, Meeting and Greeting in Caribbean Song. So this is the anthology. This is the 100 voices plus of Miss Lou, tributes, poems, essays, and it's done, being produced by the University of the West Indies Press. I am very grateful to them for that production, and I offer you this amazing anthology, 100 plus voices for Miss Lou. I am Professor Opal Palmer Adisa, and I am the editor of the anthology, and it has been and will remain my great pleasure and my great honor to have done this project in honor of Miss Lou and to say thank you, thank you. Walk good.